Mother Earth is regarded as one of the oldest beings in the universe, and most probably the only known home to sustainable life. Over billions of years, she has evolved from one life-giving stage to the next. Yet, instead of aging gracefully, she faces destruction with every passing moment. Mother Earth was meant to be the nurturer of all life bestowed upon her soil. Now that very same life threatens her existence. In the struggle to improve his life, the power of man's knowledge sadly did, and is still doing more harm than ever imaginable to this sensitive habitat. Where the earth could once breathe joyously, every gasp now is a struggle for survival. About 1/3 of its surface is already utilized for agriculture in an attempt to increase food production to feed millions of hungry mouths around the globe. Along with this venture to alleviate a devastating social concern came an unanticipated threat to the existence of the earth and all its life. What seemed an easy solution in the struggle against crop-destroying pests gave birth to a villain. The existence of harmful chemicals, their constant use and obsolescence contribute enormously to land degradation, soil contamination and water pollution, which seriously threatens both the health of rural and urban populations. At a regional and global level, the use of chemicals continues to grow at a rapid pace, faster than the rate at which they are being destroyed. After decades of misuse and mismanagement of pesticides, the situation in Africa and the rest of the developing world became more dangerous and increasingly alarming. Toxic waste ranges from stockpiles of obsolete pesticides to associated waste, such as contaminated soils and containers used to transport or store pesticides, 30% of which is regarded as persistent organic pollution, POPs. In Africa, more than 120,000 tons of obsolete stockpiles exist. Some governments budget huge amounts for pesticide purchasing, and many are also receiving large quantities donated by developed countries. While the developed countries are in a position to minimize the threat of toxic waste, the poorer countries suffer greatly, not only because they cannot afford to do away with their obsolete and toxic wastes, but also due to a lack of knowledge about the dangers of these chemicals. In many cases, obsolete pesticides are obtained from countries that use Africa as a dumping site for pesticides or chemicals they do not find useful any longer. Ineffective import controls, poor pesticide management, and the absence of properly trained staff to work with chemicals create a perfect scenario for disaster. 53 countries in Africa are threatened by the existence of toxic wastes. An example is the desperately poor inhabitants of an Ethiopian village suffering from the ill effect and toxic smell that permanently pervades and lingers in the air. This is the result of obsolete stockpiles kept at a waste site right in the middle of the village. These chemicals are leaking into the ground, while at the family huts only a few meters away, women are preparing food, children are playing, and livestock graze the area around the dwellings. In Yemen, pesticides are regarded as completely reliable to keep pests away. The country, like everywhere else, obtains funding from donors to purchase pesticides and related materials, or directly receive these as donations. These pesticides are stored close to people's homes for convenience, but storage conditions do not meet international standards. They are unaware of the hazards and irreversible environmental dangers that are potentially fatal. For many years, nothing was done to address the problem. Few realize that sites like these not only affect the local inhabitants, but also pose a global threat. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, together with other partners, therefore embarked on a clean-up project across Africa. But the pace is slow, mostly due to a lack of financial resources. Over nearly a decade, only a fraction of stockpiles has been disposed of. In the meanwhile, annual totals of pesticide products sold are on the increase, amounting to over $30 billion. In an attempt to generate maximum profits, Companies producing pesticides aggressively market their products using catchy phrases and convincing campaigns. Advertisements and publicity gimmicks can set dangerous traps for humans, but unfortunately they still appeal to naive and innocent consumers who believe the promises of total safety. Today, no place on earth is free, and no one can escape this danger. Pesticides in the form of powder, dust or granules escape from uncontrolled stockpiles and are transported by wind and convection currents to come back as rain, which is transported downstream towards lakes or the ocean. In many rural areas, people rely on the contaminated rivers and streams as their only source of water. Every living person in the world contains some form of harmful chemicals in their bodies. Residues accumulate in the tissues of people who are vulnerable to long-term exposure. In many cases, the effects of some persistent chemicals can still be detected a few generations later. Many chemicals are also associated with certain diseases and illnesses. DDT was found to be the probable cause of many cancers and reproductive disorders. Even 30 years after exposure to this chemical, the negative effects are still visible. Yet DDT is still not gone, even though it has been banned in several countries. It lingers in the air, soil and water, and is still intensively sprayed in many developing countries to control mosquitoes. No proper destruction facilities exist in Africa. Obsolete stockpiles can only be disposed of by carefully repackaging them in specially manufactured UN-approved containers and shipping them off to developed countries where proper destruction facilities exist. The removal and destruction of obsolete stocks in dedicated high-temperature incinerators costs about $3,500 per ton. This is a complicated and dangerous undertaking, which is neither simple nor cheap. Efforts to control the circulation of chemicals led to the development of the Prior Informed Consent, PIC, treaty, an initiative that requires exporting and importing countries to provide ample information about the movements of chemicals. The International Forum on Chemical Safety is a cooperative group of government representatives that focus on the promotion of environmentally sound management of chemicals. The Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, FAO, developed a series of guidelines which include the necessity of monitoring services to ensure that international safety and environmental standards are kept, establishing proper cooperation among donor governments, aid agencies, and recipient governments and agrochemical companies, promoting methods of pest management that will reduce reliance on pesticides, limit aid agencies and agrochemical companies to those willing to take back or help dispose of unused products, seeking and mobilizing funding for disposal operations, ensuring the means and ways for prevention of accumulation of stockpiles, complying to international conventions and agreements. It is an undeniable fact that our world is facing a serious threat. Humankind is forced to face the consequences of its careless actions and unwillingness to take responsibility to deal with this problem. What was once regarded as a third world tragedy turned into a global threat. The time has arrived for every human being to respond to the fundamental principle of life, the struggle for survival. If we realize this early enough, perhaps then Mother Earth will revive and breathe comfortably again, to be a safe place for generations to come.